Hello. I look a bit skinny this week. I don't know why. I need to eat more, I think. We're doing my pull-ups. Yeah, looking all right. But I could be bulkier for sure. Hi. This week on these Insta chat thingies, I am going to be talking to a dear friend of mine called Shilo. Now, Shilo is just a phenomenal woman. Her work with her collective, the Fearless Collective, is just so inspiring to me, as well as just an incredible array of feminist beauty. She's just amazing. Hi, Warp Spaces. Hello. Hey, Rasta Delhi. How's it going? God, I miss Rasta, man. I miss Delhi. I miss Bombay. I miss India massively. Big love to all the Indian fam. Hi, Nero. Hi, Samixa. Samixa? It's a great name. And Dhruv, hi. And Shiloh is here. I will request her friendship. God, my hair's awful today as well. I need a haircut and I need to eat more food. Ridiculous. Ah, Shiloh!
Hey!
Hello! How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
You accused me of drinking tea on your post. And I was like, tea? I'm not going to drink tea.
Sorry for assuming your hippiness. I know. Hang on, this camera's a little funny. Let's adjust this. Hi. Yeah, no, I'm sticking with the bourbon for sure. Hi, Kaveri. How's it going? In the chats. Darker Records in the house. But yeah, thank you for doing this, Shiloh.
Pardon?
Thank you for agreeing to do this, love. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. I thought you never asked.
Ah, of course.
Why not me to go live with him yet? What the hell's going on with that?
Ha, ha. But yeah, so I was thinking back to all the times that we've interacted over the years, and generally they've been at festivals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably where I first met you, right? Was it Magnetic Fields?
No,
I
I
first met
think
you.
my first proper memory of you was being slammed into the floor by
Heather.
friends and then thrown into a lift. So
That's a hell of an introduction. It's a great story. I love that story. So basically, we were at NH7 Weekender in Pune. And we were all going to the after party or somewhere in some hotel, right? And there was a lift full of my friends, but it was too full. So I was like, you know, being the chivalrous chap that I am, I was just like, okay, you guys go and I'll stay back. And every time the doors closed, I'd open it and just walk past like a dickhead. And did this like 4 or 5 times.
yeah.
And yeah, and then our friend Heather, who's a very strong lady, she was like, get the fuck out the way to everyone in the lift. The door opened and she rushed at me, grabbed me by my legs and body slammed me onto the floor.
And that was another love story altogether. That was the beginning of many love stories.
Totally.
Heather has never personally body slammed me. And it makes me wonder, why would she body slam you and not body slam me?
It's because I'm way more annoying than you are.
Perhaps, yes.
Way more annoying. Did you, okay, so go on, you saying?
No, I was saying, or it's either that or I just like distract Heather by saying like, go and build this thing, go and weld this thing, go and work with this thing instead.
Heather is basically one of the most incredible women I've ever met because she's brought Flashdance to life, that film about a dancer that goes and welds at night, in the day, or yeah, she's just amazing. I mean, that's the thing. You've built this team around you. So like I said, you obviously corrected me. We met at Weekender. We then hung out at Magnetic Fields, at Supersonic, at, you know, various festivals. And then you came to London and you happened to exhibit at the same time I was throwing a night at South Bank, which was mad.
Yeah.
It was just such a coincidence. But that one piece of work that I knew you for was Pulse and Bloom, which is the famous metal lotuses. You want to tell me about that and how that whole concept started and stuff?
Yeah, so Pulse and Bloom came about because I fell madly in love with a neuroscientist. And while that relationship did not last or do very well, it did lead to some really beautiful art that was created out of it. Because we were in Brazil and we were talking a lot about how and he had studied the brainwaves of meditating monks in the Himalayan mountains for a long time. And we were speaking a lot about how when people spend enough time with each other, their heart rates start to sync up. And kind of started to speak about how it would be quite incredible to create an actual physical installation that would bring together biograde medical technology with art, but you could get into it and have it at different spaces. And we applied for a grant at Burning Man And then we got that grant, and then we brought Heather on board, and we brought a bunch of other incredible people on board, and actually, yeah, made this crazy installation, which most recently was ripped off in a Telugu film. I saw that.
I saw that. I mean, it's been in The Simpsons as like, which is nuts. It's like, what the fuck? Like, Shiloh's work got ripped off by like in The Simpsons, and then for a fucking like for a Southeast like a Tamil film. Was it Telugu film? Sorry, is it?
A Telugu film. Yeah, I was quite flattered by the Simpsons thing. I was like, oh, this is great, this is amazing. And then when it happened with the Telugu film, with like Prabhas dancing around my lotuses with a bunch of white girls in the background, I was like, this is not what I want.
I want to clarify, they're not your lotuses. They were shitter than your lotuses.
Yeah, they were much worse. Thank you.
They were shit. Like, they were just like triangular and like, they were violent. They looked like fucking blades. Yours are so much more feathery.
Thanks, babe. I thought no one would ever call me feathery, but that's exactly how I want to feel.
I mean, there you go. It's years of raving that'll do it to you. It'll give you feathery edges for sure. Fucking hell. But yeah, so then there was another work. It's a pulse and bloom toured everywhere. And it's basically you put your hand against this plate, and then another person puts their hand against that plate, and it triggers lights that are in sync with your heart, right? Mm-hmm. And then eventually the lights sync up, and you can see the lights moving simultaneously. Yep,
exactly. And that's kind of beautiful because there are many things that happen like that to bodies when they spend enough time together. And if anything, the last few months proven to us that we are so deeply interconnected, right? Like I sneeze on my hand, and then I touch a glass, and then somebody else touches the glass, and then boom. But that's of course a worst case scenario with COVID. In the best case scenario, what does happen is like our bodies do synchronize. Our hearts start to beat in time with each other when we spend enough time, especially lovers, long-term relationships, mothers and their children. They say that their hearts actually beat in time together, and that's why they say you have a broken heart. When you break up with someone, you actually lose the person whose heart you've been beating with. But there are other things as well, like sometimes when a teacher is teaching a class, all of the students will begin to breathe in time with the teacher. So our bodies have these really beautiful invisible ways of syncing up with each other.
That's fascinating, because I always thought, like, I'm not a big fan of organized religions or sort of structures of people and hierarchies, but I went to Old Jerusalem, and you really can't fuck with masses of people believing the same thing. There's something tangible happening.
Absolutely.
And it's the same at a rave, and it's the same at a sporting event. And you've just made me occur that I reckon everyone in that room must be synchronizing in some way. And it'd be fascinating to observe heart rates at religious things, at festivals, at in clubs. That'd be fucking interesting to see.
Absolutely. I mean, especially I think this is also, again, in this time when we haven't been able to gather together in mass, when, like the Hajj has been cancelled, so the Kaaba is sitting completely empty, all of these clubs are sitting empty. Like, what are we missing out on a, like, physical, pheromonal level, because we haven't been able to just gather together?
And digitally doesn't really cut it. Although I've got to say, like I say every week, these things have really helped me at least sort of decide, or help me sort of figure out what day of the week it is. Let alone that. Let alone getting fucked up with a dear friend on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, I think actually this is probably safer for you and I discussing things and drinking in this fashion than it is normally.
I feel like I've kind of like lost track of what day it is now or what month we're in. So for me, it's had the opposite effect where I'm just like, I don't know anymore. Where am I going?
I can tell you exactly what week it is. Hang on a second. This is week 25.
Oh, really?
Of lockdown.
Wow. Because you've had a different Instagram session every week?
Every week since the 25th of March.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you were in a form of lockdown before this all began anyway.
Oh, because of my leg. Yeah, I had a really, really, really bad fucking accident where a half-ton table fell on my leg and just shredded the inside of my knee, which was great. So the surgery for that was pretty massive. They sort of reconstructed my knee. So I was kind of crippled for like 3 months. But I tell you what, this is fucking great, actually. The first gig that I played after that was the final ever Foreign Beggars gig in London.
Wow.
And that was like, Pavan Ebo, rest in peace, is over there. He passed away, right? So that was just awful during lockdown. Not COVID related, that was awful. But yeah, their last London show was something special, obviously. And the whole of London was out to see them. But I was sat at the bar on a stool with crutches. And every DJ or every musician was like, fucking hell, Nerm, what the hell happened? Here's the shot. So I had a fuckload of tequila. And it was a case where if I couldn't walk before that, I definitely couldn't fucking walk after that. I was shit-faced drunk. And then Pavan messaged me going, bro, bring some USBs for the after party. I was like, fine. So I had like 2 USB sticks and these headphones, I think. Nothing pro at all. Not like my computer or sound card or anything. It was just like, there we go. Went back to their big warehouse venue that they have in Tottenham and plugged in and started playing on crutches for 3 fucking hours. Like it was like watching a tumble dryer. It's like bodies just flying everywhere. This huge, big fuck off rave. But unfortunately, there was a dude there on crystal meth who was just like roaming around being really aggressive and smashing into people. And he came up to the decks and ripped out the speaker and threw it at my head. So I ducked, got a crutch and went to get him. And then thankfully the crowd jumped in and got rid of him. But it was a hell of a welcome back. Like it was the best welcome back to clubbing ever. It was wicked.
Oh my. Actually, it's funny because in a completely different context, right before the lockdown, I had similar life-threatening situations at Shaheen Bagh. And with like bullets going off in the background and Hindu mobs running and, you know, us on scaffolding painting this mural and like 70,000 people screaming Inqilab, Zindabad, and like literally running away from mobs trying to find a safe space that we could hide in, getting up and then spending the next 3 months sitting at home. So.
That's crazy. I mean, that you've been actually sort of trying to change the world, but I've just had my head up my own ass, essentially.
No, but
so, I mean that's
all movements, you know, like I feel like movements are, and if anything that this whole period has taught me that is that like in whatever context, be it in the revolution or in the club, like movement, music, and life is just so beautiful, you know.
I was thinking with Shaheen Bagh, like. It reminded me of the sort of work you've done with the Fearless Collective, which is your organization. You've got into some really fucking dangerous places to assert like femininity and feminine energy and feminine art, which is just amazing. Like, why? Like, I know why, I know the purpose, but like, I mean, it just takes such guts to do that. Like,
Why? That's a good question. This is a question that my mom asks me pretty much like every time I'm about to head on the road. Like right now, we're about to do a 4-city tour. We're going to be with the Waste Pickle community, and in Delhi, we're going to be painting with queer communities in Jaipur and Lucknow. So I'm basically renting like a big red Jeep and putting Fearless on the side of it and driving around the country. And my mom's first question is why, and I'm like, but I guess for me personally, art played a very tremendous role in a lot of healing. Like I always say, beauty saved me, and particularly self-portraiture and painting myself became into a very big part of my own, like dealing with my own childhood trauma, dealing with my own life. And in my studio, you see a lot of paintings right here. So I have no doubt that beauty has the capacity to heal many people. And so that's the foundation of it. And the second part of it is also, right now, this is the moment of fear that we're all collectively feeling. And there's a kind of heightened sense of bodily awareness. But this kind of fear and this kind of awareness is something that growing up in India, women have always just had. There's not, you know, right, like it's a kind of a running joke at home that before I used to leave my house, before my mother would say, do you have a jacket? And now when I leave the house, my mom's like, do you have your mask? And I'm just like, you know, do I always have to be covering up some part of my body to and so fear has just been a big part of our lives growing up in India. And when I do see women in spaces together, being themselves, feeling embodied and feeling fearless, it's just the most beautiful sight to behold, and I want to create more of that energy. So that does place us in situations where we end up in pretty dangerous places, be it in the middle of a civil war in Lebanon, or in a brothel in Pakistan, or with indigenous communities in Brazil, or most recently at Shaheen Bagh. But to be able to replace fear in those spaces with love.
Mm. How do you cope with aggression? Because you must have seen a lot of aggression towards you in those spaces. I mean, I'm thankful that you're present and safe and doing your work. But has that ever sort of, has something bad ever happened to you in terms of that?
Yeah,
aggression?
nothing to me, I would say. But we've definitely found ourselves in pretty intense situations. Like, for example, in Lebanon, we were working with a group of Syrian and Palestinian refugees, on a project about home. And as we were painting this mural of a young Syrian Palestinian rapper called Saleh, who's incredibly close to my heart, and he's he's incredible. Like, everything that he says is poetry. And he was first displaced from Palestine, and then was in a camp in Syria, and then the Syrian crisis happened, and he was displaced from there and placed in Lebanon. So he's double displaced. He's like completely stateless. And like I said, he's an incredible rapper, and we were painting this huge mural with him. And it turns out that the people whose wall we were painting on were pro-Assad, and he was, of course, very anti-Assad, and he started to rap about how he was against what was happening in Syria. And we found ourselves in a situation where we were in the middle of an ongoing civil war, and the people in that neighborhood were just like, if he comes back here, then we will silence him. Like, we're just gonna get rid of him.
What's his name, love?
Saleh.
Saleh the rapper.
Saleh. I'll send you links. I don't know if you're gonna find.
Cool.
Yeah, and so we found ourselves in a situation where he was being threatened, and we were kind of taking care of him and his community. And in that sort of space, then the only thing that we can do is to and speak and really open up dialogue, and try to make it less about political ideologies and more about people's personal and emotional realities. So to make him feel like he's an 18-year-old child who's been displaced, and in the eyes of the people who work against his political ideology as well. So we've been in situations like that. We've been in situations where we've been painting out in Delhi with a group of young girls, and we've had like cops turn up and try and get aggressive, or drunk men turn up and try and get aggressive. But the sneaky strategy that we have, is to really call people in rather than calling them out. So instead of being like, you fucker, like, why are you here? Why are you looking at us? Why are you staring at us? Why are you doing this? But instead to really get them to understand what is happening inside us. Yeah.
It's fascinating, because I think I was talking to Bhavan, in fact, last week, because his project's there, and he's obviously blue throughout the whole project. So I think we're dealing with a lot of, a lot of far-right fundamentalists. And one of the things that he was very keen on doing that I was against was trying to engage with apathy. And my opinion was, there's no point, because you don't want those people as fans at the end of the day. It's not people you actually want to follow your work, because it will be, the actual richness and depth of mythology that's got into the work won't be appreciated anyway. Yeah. So I think that there's a certain case of talking to people with apathy and empathy, rather, not apathy, empathy. And how do you navigate that? Because I'm kind of at the end of my tether, where I'm just like, why would I bother? And how do you do that?
Yeah, I think actually that is perhaps a life skill that extends very much when I'm working on the streets, but doesn't extend to my personal life or to my home very well. I'm just like, shut up, Bob, shut up.
Yeah, fuck off. Basically, you don't do that. Yeah.
But when I'm on the streets, there is this, I guess, the thing about public space is that it isn't my space or their space, it's public. And so we do have to, even if it's really difficult, we do have to be able to make room, and as much room for the idea that perhaps more than one reality can coexist. But especially when it comes to like Hindu mythology, which I engage with quite a bit, or even a lot of Muslim iconography, like that for me is even more fascinating, because ultimately it's like you're defending a relationship with an imaginary being in a way, or an imagination, right?
Or an idea.
or an idea, yeah, an imagination. And so it's like perhaps my relationship with Vishnu or Krishna or Allah or the Prophet is a very personal relationship because it's my imagination meeting a collective imagination. And to be able to defend that personal relationship and to again call people into that personal relationship with articulation, with knowledge, is really important. And that does mean, rather than disengaging, for me, it means deeply engaging, like reading all those books, reading the Quran, understanding it deeply, embedding myself in this culture deeply so I can reclaim and reinterpret it really.
Mm. And then how do you defend that to people that would attack you?
So I have to say, touch wood, kind of good karma or graces when it comes to people attacking me because I don't get attacked too often.
That's fucking good to hear. Excellent.
Amazing, because I do a lot of silly, risky things, and somehow, yeah, have some good graces in that space. But perhaps also a part of it is the depth of engagement, because genuinely, that I'm not just taking these icons or symbols or ideas because they're cool, but it is also because I care. Like I do have a relationship with these stories, these things, and so. Yeah, so I actually enjoy it, and I actually think that's part of the work that we need to do as contemporary Indians in different parts of the world is like giving ourselves the agency to be able to reinterpret and really own these stories. And
Yeah.
rather than just discarding it, like I know so many people from India and Pakistan and South Asia in general who are so sick of fundamentalism and so overwhelmed by it that they're just like, fuck it. Like I don't want to identify as a Muslim. I don't want to identify as a Hindu. I don't want to identify as an Indian.
I'm there. I'm totally there. That's my position now, where even my label Shiva Sound System, the design, the reason why it's called Shiva Sound System was because it was to sort of be anti-hippie in a way. It was like, let's lure you in with incense and shit and punch you in the face because we're punks. But I think calling myself a Hindu, I can't do that anymore. I think it's been ruined for me now.
That's the thing. But if it gets ruined for us by fundamentalists, then how do all the beautiful parts of it get preserved? And it's not just ruined by fundamentalists; it's also ruined by the hippies. In all honesty, like if I had, like, it just irritates me so much. And I live between India and Bali at the moment, and Bali is like center, like Kaaba for so many people who change their name to Shiva or Durga Shakti Yoni or whatever. And I'm just like, can you all just fuck off? Actually, like,
I mean that. Sorry, I misheard. I didn't hear you there. What did you say, love?
No, I'm just saying, like, can you stop ruining it for us? Like the idea of communal living, like Shiva, Shakti, Yoni, Tantra, all of this. It's just like mantras. Like these are all beautiful things, and then they actually end up getting so dissolved in their appropriations that it ruins it for us in a way.
Yeah, and I mean I very rarely talk about that because of that, because I don't like it's become a point where, like you say, fundamentalism and the appropriation of it has meant that I want to express my culture in different ways that are more subtle, and not necessarily, have to put it all out there. And I think also there's a certain cool, I think that I don't know whether you'd agree, but sometimes restrictions make you more creative, right? So you can do things in a way fucking cooler way that wasn't even thought of before without having to be obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. But I sometimes like wonder, like if it wasn't for colonization, then where would we be all of these years? Like, would we have a completely... And this is part of the thought experiment that also in lockdown we've been playing with. Like, we've been hosting a lot of these Zoom sessions, which I'm kind of done with now. If I have to do another Zoom call, like, I'm tired.
Yeah, sorry about this one. Yeah.
No, this is great. I'm not in class about it. Official Zoom call.
Exactly.
But we've been doing a lot of workshops with groups of like South Asians, Muslims across the world, and really thinking and dreaming of futures together. So today, just before this, I was facilitating a workshop on queer Muslim futures and futurisms. And for me, that's a really interesting and fascinating space because it's like, of course, we've all seen Beyonce's new video and, Afrofuturism and also Afrobeat. And like, we're seeing how the continent has managed to really find a space to be able to create a contemporary identity that draws from the past, but not in ways that are like typical or it's contemporary, it's fresh, exciting, And I feel like we were starting to get that actually with Shiva Sound System, with Salman Singh, like we had that entire Indian underground thing going, which was so exciting. And now I wonder what the next phase of that is for us, like, and bringing together people, our arts and culture and music and creating a South Asian future.
I think that the immigrant story over here has a lot to play with that, and assertion against sort of racism or stereotypical identity sort of bestowed upon you or fucking thrust upon you. And that sort of, the reaction against that, particularly in Britain and in fact politics, has led to things like punk, like rave, like our movement. Like, it's always been a reaction to some repressive fucking institution or law or something. You know what I mean? It's been like a pushback. And I think that it was fascinating, because I think that when we got into Radio 1 and we were quite successful, did all these tours and stuff, I was like, fucking great that, we've smashed the glass ceiling, there'll be a raft of artists. And there wasn't. And and then I realized years later, and then around about, say, maybe I think 4 or 5 years ago, I felt like a whole movement of brown women owning their shit in England and just gunning for it. So Nabia Iqbal, sorry. So she was known as Throwing Shade, signed to Ninja Tune. She just reclaimed it. Her own name was like, fuck this, I'm Nabia Iqbal, and that's it. Yeah. There's Ms. Mohammed, who's like a Trinidadian gay goth. And she's just fucking like, who ever heard of dancehall goth? It's fucking amazing. And there was a whole raft. Oh, I'll send you the music. But it was so heartening to see this like wave of like literally brown women doing their own shit on their own terms. It was fucking amazing. And so I think for me, that was really heartening to see. And also, like, I'm down with anything that's weird and brown. You know what I mean? I love anything odd that fucks with people.
Yeah, and actually, I feel like right now is also the right time to be asking about, like, what is the next phase of that sort of movement of reclaiming parts of our identity that are beautiful, that need to stand as a counterforce for all the fundamentalism that exists within our own spaces, and simultaneously taking up space in the quote-unquote first world or the Western world, right? Because like something that's been happening that's been quite weird and interesting. Before the lockdown, I was kind of at a place in my career where I was just like, you know what? Fuck New York. Sorry, I love London and I love you, but I was also like, fuck London, fuck like Paris. I don't want to be in any of those spaces, because the more I go to those spaces, the more I give up my own power. Instead, can I be in Johannesburg and give a talk in Johannesburg? Can I be in Jakarta and understand what the art scene in Jakarta is like? And in the process of doing that, or Mexico City, and in the process of doing that, can we also start to reclaim power and shift the centers of power from the global north to the global south? Because at some point, Cairo would have been a center of power, or Jerusalem was a center of power, because people were giving it power, right? And so right before the lockdown, I was kind of in this place where I was just like, yeah, like, I'll do it if I'm getting paid well, and I'll go and like stand in Amsterdam and give a talk and things like that. But what I'm really interested in is shifting power to the global south. And then this funny thing happened, where after the lockdown began, it was suddenly like all these different, art installations or opportunities that invariably paid opportunities were in the global north also disappeared. And it was like, okay, fuck, like, where do we stand now? Like, did we fight all of this way to be able to have opportunities in spaces like London, Paris? And now after this lockdown, has our world and the power dynamics in our world shifted in ways that are actually detrimental to all the work that we've been doing so far? Our borders closing up in ways that have become, detrimental. Like, is it really harder for me to get into the UK or into the US with an Indian passport?
I was just going to say your passport with that passport for sure.
Yeah, knowing that India has the most amount of cases, like I had an exhibition in Paris, I was going to do an installation in the UK called Cancer, that showed the Nerm Center in London.
Sorry, you cut out in that whole last sentence, love. I couldn't hear you.
No, I was saying that, like, I had a show in Paris that got cancelled at a museum. I had a show London at the Nerm Center that got cancelled. I had installation in the UK cancelled. The one thing that I managed to fight for was like an installation in California, and that was also me just being like, you can't do this. You can't cut all your brown and black artists because the world has shut down. Like, you need to find a way, push the
And that's where you highlight something interesting, is that you know, pushing, essentially you're talking about not going to the old colonial powers, the Western centers of power, and building new centers of power across the world in less sort of privileged places. But the problem with that then is that you'll create a vacuum where bullshit art will take its place, and you'll get that fucking box ticking exercise where it's like, let's get a brown woman in and any old shit will do. Do you know what I mean? Whereas your work is of quality. So then there's that fucking power dynamic as well, where you have to do these things because it'll be done badly otherwise.
Yeah. Which I think for me, the balance over there is saying like, let's do it, but let's do it with complete clear intention, that it's no longer like, oh wow, like I have this opportunity to go and do this thing in the West, but instead it's me being like, I'm going to go there because you guys got the cash. Can you please sign the check? Take the check back home. I'm going to hang out. Oops, I think I disconnected.
Oh. You said you're going to hang out and then you turn into a robot.
No, I was like, I'm going to get that check, like basically secure the bag, come back home, do my thing. Like in Bombay or in Delhi or in, again, Jaisalmer, Kerala, like Bali, Indonesia, so that then we really know, like, yeah, that this is also powerful. It's no longer just about presenting ourselves outside.
Can I ask you a question then? Like, as an artist, right, you've obviously had success, you know how to like run a business, you know how to actually, you know, be self-sustaining in that respect. How fucking difficult was it to go from starting out to being this, in that position?
Yeah. Again, I think like we have a very a huge advantage in India in a way, which is that it's very easy to get recognized pretty early on, right? Like, I think it's this...
and with all due respect, you're bolshy as fuck, so you can't really not take notice of you.
Thanks. Yeah. But yeah, like I think there is about the masses are trying to get into engineering, you know, trying to be doctors. And so the few people who have the privilege to be able to say, actually, I want to be an artist, and have the privilege also to be exposed to good things, can break it out into the first kind of, like, you can get noticed quite soon, which is quite amazing. And for me, that was like being 16 years old and starting to illustrate books for children, you know, and working for big publishing houses at 16, which was quite crazy at that age. And the trick though is how not to get too satisfied with that, and how to keep pushing at your own quality, you know, to keep it, to not be mediocre and not be satisfied with being mediocre. Because it's very easy to crack something over here and then just do it forever and ever and ever.
So that's it. And also big up Durga, who's in the comments, big up Vandana, and big up Kaveri. Yeah, hi guys. Actually, this is an interesting one. Nandini says, is there also a certain social capital that you carried because your mother's an artist too?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. So the funny thing about the Suleman dynasty,
Suleman dynasty, fucking hell,
is that it is quite self-made, in the sense that again, kind of my mother started painting in her late 30s, and I started painting around the same time when I was 16 years old. And the reason that we started to paint was because my dad, who was a little bit of a magician, he disappeared, and so it became into kind of, at first, like a way to be able to financially sustain ourselves. Like,
oh wow, like that, disappeared like that.
I mean, in the sense that he said he was going for a business trip, and then we didn't hear from him for many years after.
That's what I mean, like that. Fuck. Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay.
And she didn't have a job. She had, she had harbored dreams of being a housewife at that point, and that was her dream. Like, she just wanted to have children and have a baby, and that was the imagination that was handed down to her as someone who grew up in Indore in Madhya Pradesh. And so she found herself in a situation where she was like, oh, like I have these children, I have to take care of them. What can I do? And she could draw. And so she began to teach art, and I would teach art with her when I was 14, 15 years old. And simultaneously, she started to paint. I started to paint at the same time. You know, at night, we would both paint together. And at first, our work was not like this, or even like my mother's work right now. Our work was really dark. Like the first, for me as a 15, 16-year-old, like, I'm kind of angsty at that point anyway. Like, it was, I was listening to heavy metal back then. Like,
I
So
was going to say, like at 16, most people's work is dark.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
But also you went through
what
some
is it
shit,
like?
right? So that's going to be represented in your art.
Pardon?
You went through some serious shit, and that's been represented in your art, obviously, as
Yeah,
well.
so a lot of our work was full of abandonment, pain, and here's again the kind of beautiful thing about pain, and also a lot of the work that we do with Fearless and trauma therapy comes from that same place. Is that if you stay with your pain long enough, it shifts. It doesn't stay that way. And so we did shift, and our world did start to transform day by day. And she had her first show the same year that I had my first book published. And so we both
Okay.
had this parallel journey in the art world. And having said that, of course, like she's still a master, and she became into a master over the years that I knew her. And it is still both a tremendous and a terrible presence to have in the house. Yeah.
I mean, do you ever get accusations of nepotism and shit like that?
Not so much actually. Again, I don't get accused that much, which feels really nice. Yeah.
I mean, this is great. This is the most like sort of friendly chat. Like, yeah, no one attacks me. No one says shit about me. I have a
Yeah, I can just do whatever I want in the world. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. That's fucking
But I
great.
do, like, heartbreak is definitely a big part of my own karmic pattern. So,
I mean, heartbreak's part of everyone's fucking battle, right? Everyone's got some huge tragic heartbreak in their lives that then furthers their art. And I think once you go through that pain, fuck, I sound like a hippie. I'm so sorry. But once you like eat the shit sandwich, right, and deal with the shit sandwich, then you shit out the shit sandwich and you feel a lot better for it.
absolutely, yeah.
That's a really terrible analogy.
It's the worst I've heard. I also but like, I mean, Monica and Anjali used to always make fun of me because anytime they would be like, "Oh, I just went to the bathroom and I just pooped," or whatever, I just be like, "Don't talk to me about this. I
I
can't."
just messaged you that. I literally messaged you that before we came. I went and I pooped. Yay! I feel fucking good. Well, listen, you said you were into metal. What was your favorite band?
Oh, back then I was into immolation.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a hectic
Wow.
girl.
Wow. See, I sort of left metal around about Obituary, Napalm Death sort of era. I'm old.
Oh,
I'm old. Actually, there's a really lovely comment here from Gunjan who's saying, I love your words as much as I love your art. Do you write all that yourself?
yes, I do write them all myself. And actually, that's become something that I've started to do more recently. I always saw myself when I was very young, when I was like 10, 12, I used to write a lot of poetry, and I wanted to be a writer when I grew up. And then art completely took over, visual art completely took over. And it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that I've started to take poetry very seriously. And over the lockdown, one of the more beautiful things that happened was that I was learning Urdu with a really close friend of mine who's a Urdu poetess and also a resistance poet. And for me, writing poetry in Urdu was like another kind of joy altogether because, yeah, I mean, in a very similar way, like, my first language is English, but then I also spent a lot of time in Indore with my Muslim family when I was young. And so Urdu is my second language. But I was always celebrated when I was young because I could speak English in Indore and even in Bangalore. And so it was always like that took the front seat. And it's only post Shaheen Bagh, and it's only been in the last few years that I've been really trying to untie my tongue and untie my mother tongue specifically and write in Urdu. There's another kind of like vocabulary, even like writing erotica, for example, in Urdu. It's just like, damn, I didn't know that we could get that deep.
Well, I
It's
think
getting hot.
the lettering's so beautiful as well. They're positions unto themselves, right? So
Absolutely, absolutely. And each word is like has the potential to already, like, both Urdu and Sanskrit actually are very erotic languages. And in a way that's also become a kind of extended exploration around feminine energy and pleasure is like, not only how can I not only embody that energy in the English contemporary world, but also in my mother tongue. Like, for example, like one of the words for pussy in Sanskrit is Chandan Mahal, which means
no way.
yeah, like the perfume palace. Like,
Oh, I
imagine
thought it said
you are,
Chandan Mahal is in where the Chandan is held. I was like, okay.
yeah, like, yeah. And imagine if I grew up being like, my perfume palace. Like I would feel like a rapper all the time.
My Perfume Palace. That's the whole. It's way better than WAP. Although I love WAP. I think it's an amazing track. Actually, you know Kiran, Madam Gandhi, right?
Of course, yeah.
Right. So Kiran gave this amazing breakdown of WAP, which I think was fucking brilliant. Where there's like the whole loop, the whole refrain behind it is "There's some hoes in this house," and then there's the word "bitch," and none of those were edited, but "pussy" was the word that was edited, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
What the
Why?
fuck?
And it's quite funny actually because I was doing this like kind of street art collab thing a few months ago with a lot of like India's rappers and blah blah blah. Like street art is that was terrible in all honesty. Like this classic corporation trying to get a bunch of independent artists to do like an ad campaign. We're all doing it because we need cash, whatever. And there was this hilarious moment where, like, you know, all of the rappers were like listening to some like deep hip hop and there's lots of cursing going on and stuff. And then I played that track, My Neck, My Back, My Pussy, and My Crack. I saw them all get really shy and really embarrassed. Like, they were all just like,
There's nothing better than watching bravado crumble. It's fucking brilliant.
Like 2 minutes ago, they were all like jamming out to talking about fucking a bitch, and now somebody says lick my pussy and my crack, and you're suddenly embarrassed. Like, what the hell's going on?
I mean, bruv, if you want to do it, do it properly, bruv. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Make
totally.
it feel good.
Someone's asking what the Urdu tattoo on your hand means.
I actually don't have any Urdu tattoos on my hand.
Really?
Like a little Kannada here that says Shri.
Okay.
The name Lakshmi, which is the name of the goddess. Yeah.
And Nandini's asking, what book of poetry would you recommend?
Wow, so many. What book of poetry would I recommend? I mean, I guess.
I have one. Sorry.
Oh yeah, do it.
Wait. This is fucking amazing. Nikita Gill's Great Goddesses. She's fucking amazing. I love Nikita.
Yeah.
Do you know Nikita?
Yeah, and I really love her work. Yeah.
She's
with her a little while ago, which I popped into.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's fucking amazing. I love that girl. She's wicked. Wait, but sorry, I cut you off with your answer.
Oh no, I was just. I mean, Nikita's work is really amazing. I really like Naira's work.
Sorry, you cut out just as you said the name. Sorry.
Oh, Nikita's work is incredible, and I really love Naira Wahid's work. In terms of the old school ones, there's Akka Mahadevi, who's an old school favorite. I think there's not a single time that I'm not talking about poetry and I don't speak about Akka Mahadevi, because she basically is like a 14th century poet who took off all her clothes and went running through the forest singing songs to her lord of jasmine flowers. And it's amazing because a lot of her poetry is also it's very radical. It's very much about the feminine body, and she's naked. So
in what century?
14th century.
So my history. That's pre the Victorian sort of sterilization of all of the good things.
Yeah. Damn.
That's nuts. You know, I had William Dalrymple on this a while back, and he's got an exhibition in London about Mughal art, like sort of, it's called, I think it's, beg your pardon, it's burping because of this Coca-Cola. Beg your pardon. I think it's called Forgotten Masters. Let me just Google this, sorry. But it's essentially a lot of like masterpieces of painting from Mughal, from the Mughal world. So there's a lot of questions saying, how do you spell the name? Yes, that was Nikita Gill's book. And people are asking about the poet you're talking about. What was the name?
I'm gonna put that out here.
I'll put it in the comment. Yeah, good call. So yeah, and Will Dalrymple's obviously got like he's got the brown fever. He knows what he's talking about in terms of his history of India. But it's fascinating that at the early stages of colonialism from the British, that the whole Anglo-Indian thing was massive, in terms of that cross-pollination of cultures, there being sort of children of mixed race and heritage, and there were wills from the East India Company that were written out to Indian wives from white men, which was unheard of towards the middle to late stages of colonialism. Yeah. And it strikes me that, you know, it strikes me as odd that that sterilization took place.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's so deep because a lot of people will come to rush to the defense of the British Empire and, you know, be like, but they gave us trains things and they were,
Oh, the trains fucking argument. Oh,
yeah, the trains argument. Those trains were used to transport
the fucking wealth out the country, for fuck's sake.
yeah,
I mean,
like billions of dollars, guys, like back then. But yeah, there's the whole trains argument, and then people are very happy to hate on the Mughals when actually the Mughal emperors were far less binary than the British were, and they were also far less manipulative. Like, and they created some pretty beautiful things. And also, you know, the thing about identity is that there has to come a point when you just agree that okay, now this is India. You know, so like we've had this history now, and perhaps part of that is also owning our colonial history because the fact is that we're having this conversation in English. If I was trying to trap this conversation in Urdu, I'd probably suck. Like I wouldn't be able to.
I wouldn't be in England without it.
Exactly.
The Empire strikes back with me. Do you know what I mean? Like
exactly. We have to kind of come to terms with what happened in our past. Say like 1947, we signed a deal. We decided that Kashmir was going to have those rights. Let's not take them away. We decided.
I mean, I want to be clear that we didn't sign any deal. It was imposed. Let's just be very clear on that. That line of control was fucked and imposed on us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I just want to clarify that because I feel strongly about it. Sorry for talking over you.
No, absolutely. But like, it's like, at what point do we just assimilate and say this is what it is? This is the imagination that we agreed upon, and how do we protect that imagination? So if we agreed upon India as being like the secular space. You know, we said we're not the Hindu Republic, when, you know, we aren't an Islamic Republic, we are the secular nation of India, then how do we keep to that promise in a way? How do we assimilate the colonial, the colonized parts of ourselves and not hate those parts of ourselves, but also not assimilate the hate that was left behind by colonization? But there is a lot that like the empire really laid down. Like, for example, the sari blouse is a Victorian invention. Before that, women would just wear their saris. A lot of our ideas of morality and gender were laid down by the British.
Absolutely.
A lot of our ideas about narcotics and substances. And I say this is someone who doesn't take substances, but is still, you know, that kind of binary way of looking at things was very much laid down by the empire.
I mean, the opium wars themselves is a huge part of that. And in fact, I think you touched on that, Trish Out of Waters saying, as an Indian woman, I get annoyed and stared at by creepy men all the time. And she admires you for your bravery in dressing how you please. But I think, again, you touched on that. And it's a very, like, I think, I don't want to say Puritan, because it's not Puritan. It's like it's a very Victorian idea of what is right. That morality is quite imposed. But equally, what I find interesting is that as a sort of second generation immigrant over here, raised with people that held their culture so closely when they came here because they were so far away, that it then went into a form of repression and this idea of I don't want to say this in a bad way. Actually, I'm trying to say this in a way that's not derogatory, but it's kind of like looking back to a certain time and putting those values on today.
Yeah.
And so therefore, a lot of brown people that I know in the UK have some really messed up values in terms of what's deemed as acceptable or what will people say, all that kind of typical shit. And when I first came to India on tour, I was fucking gobsmacked by the kind of the women that I met that were like sexually confident and out there and just do what the fuck they wanted to. Whereas over here, there was such a conservatism with people that I went to university with, you know, and it was almost like this time warp for culture with immigrants over here, you know. It was a very strange thing. And it seems like there was certain progress in India, but then it stalled and then pulled back again. And it seems to be continually pulled back. So we talked about this earlier, but the whole thing in the media right now where you can target a woman and slut shame her and call her out and all this kind of shit to distract from the real issues is fucking insane.
Yeah, it's completely insane. And again, it's interesting because, like, for me, I'm sure a lot of people who you have interviewed in the last couple of months who are directly from, you know, the Bollywood circles and the acting scene would probably have a lot more to say about this. from their community. But as someone who has seen a lot of Muslim people be arrested in the last few months with absolute impunity, who has seen a lot of activists be arrested in the last few months. I think this is really interesting to me because on one hand, it's like, do you see how those in power can suddenly make someone into an enemy when it suits their story? And you see how difficult that is. Because actually, like, the gradient of power, we may feel, or people in the Bollywood industry may feel like they come from a space of privilege, but that privilege can be taken away. Like, you can suddenly become into a woman, suddenly become into a Muslim person, and suddenly become into any of those binaries when it's convenient for those who are truly in power. And so,
100%.
like, the thing to really think about here is like, this is insane, and this has been happening for the last few months during this entire lockdown. To activists, to Muslim women, people have been taken into jail, like pregnant, with absolutely no clear evidence against them. That's one thing. The second thing is also like how easy it is to be like drugs, addiction, like they used to smoke weed or whatever, and make that into a very comprehensive argument. And how difficult is it to really sit with the with addiction? And addiction is being something that isn't just a criminal offense or drugs, and we really need to be working with the trauma that we inherit and exist in as South Asian people and as Indian people. And addiction is something that comes out of trauma, depression, mental illness, emotion, like intergenerational trauma. All of this is stuff to be spoken about, and it also connects up again with kind of talking about patriarchy and women's issues in a way that, a lot of people were very pleased that the rapist went to jail and were hung.
Who went to jail, sorry?
The rapist, the Nirbhaya case rapist.
Yes, yeah.
Justice. What justice looked like was, this is a criminal offense, taken to jail, like,
Killed him.
over. But at the same time, that doesn't really heal. Like, it doesn't heal. Like, and I don't think statistically things have shifted that much in the country since then. So how do we look at things like addiction? How do we look at drugs? How do we look at substance abuse? How do we look at rape? And from the lens of restorative justice, from the lens of trauma healing, and talk about healing a little bit more than we talk about crime. And
I think that's because you've got a good heart and you can see a sort of empathy and a love angle to it. Whereas being a man and having an understanding male fragility, and also understanding, like when I was a teenager, that objectification of women was very prevalent. And it's kind of something that, if she's sleeping with him, she could sleep with me kind of bullshit. You know what I mean? It's something that you literally objectify with me. You don't even fucking know it. You know what I mean? And that curve of male rejection can lead to so much damage and so much fucking pain, but it's never talked about and it's never discussed. And it's only Prince actually that saved that for me, because songs like If I Was Your Girlfriend, that actually put him in a female role in a relationship with a woman. I was like, oh shit, that's what you can do. You can talk to women as equals, and holy shit, it's way better than being this fucking macho dickhead. Like, what the fuck? So big up Prince, man, like, just every day. But it's a really serious problem all over the world, not just in India, I think. So there's someone in the comments called Manuela talking about men in India and how they react to the way you dress, and people saying you have to cover up in India because you get harassed otherwise.
I just don't listen. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And you've got very thick skin and you wear the fuck what you want, so.
Also, a part of it is like, there's a way that our own personal wounds can take up so much space that if someone harasses you on the street, if that is a space of trauma for you, it can feel very overwhelming. But if you don't have that space of trauma embedded into you, then can it just be like, okay, this guy's looking at me. So look at me, fuck off. Like that kind of, also to be able to not be so shaken up by something and actually use it as like an experience to transform. Some of that is quite.
I find that fascinating. I think maybe it's because I'm a dude, and there's like I think that violence is always just on the surface with men-to-men interactions, where I have to kind of, I have this like this I think that's a problem with me maybe, whereas empathy is not the way to avoid a fight. Running away is, and kind of having to stand my ground, because as soon as I show empathy, it's perceived as weakness. Perhaps as a dude, I don't know. Fuck, it's a weird one. There's another question here, which I think is kind of cool on the same sort of tip. It says, Renuka's asking, can you tell us your inspiration with fashion?
Oh my. Well, fashion.
Talking about that, yes.
I'll answer if you answer now. I don't know what you.
Oh, mate, my whole look is 90s lesbian.
It's true.
That is my look. 90s lesbian all the way. That's just
It's so
simple.
true. So true. So I guess when it comes to my fashion, it's like reclamation is a big part of it. Meaning, if it's cheap, it works. And also, if it like how can I take something and make it my own? It's a big part of it. And a lot of my jewelry is inherited. A lot of it is my mother's, my grandmother's. Hey, Prasheen!
Prasheen, he says Rani fashion.
Rani fashion, yeah, exactly. And someone is saying, what about if you're looking at it from a safety perspective? I think there's like a part of it which is like how safe you feel internally and how safe you feel in the world. And a lot of that feeling of safety is a psychological experience inside of you. And I do think it actually reflects in the outside world as well. Like, for example, Corona is a huge, like the way that we felt when we had 400 cases in India was terrified. Like all of us, like I remember going for a walk, I had 2 sets of gloves on. Like I was like, what the fuck am I doing right now? You know, like I was like suited up, going for a freaking walk on the street.
It's like when you meet a dodgy dude, like double rapid. Don't know where you've been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, now, like the country's opened up, today we clocked more cases and more deaths else in the world, and people just don't care. Like people are out there and they just don't care. Now, with this virus, is that a good thing? Probably not. But when it comes to feeling safe as an Indian woman, I think there is a psychological sense of safety that we have to. Because Begum Akhtar, who's an incredible Hindustani musician, she used to come on stage with a glass of whiskey in her hand in like old school mehfil. So what makes me feel like I can't do that right now? Or my mom and her best friends used to dance Remo on the beach wearing like a leopard print bikini in like the 70s and 80s, and they felt safe doing that. And why do I feel like I can't do that anymore? You know, so where is this feeling of going back to time coming from, and how can we really reclaim the parts of ourselves that we can?
It is fascinating. I think that there's something that's been playing on my mind, which is this homogenization of our rich, diverse culture and the prevention of any progress. So it's like this, the idea that everyone in India is a vegetarian, which is 29% vegetarian or something, which is, whatever. How, one of the things that I found amazing was the differing versions of the Ramayana across India.
Yeah.
And for me, personally, I'm like, well, you have almost Arthurian legend, which is a story of kings with a sprinkling of dharma on top, and that becomes those stories. But that becomes the be-all and end-all for some people. And it's like, yo, what the fuck? There's a whole load of other shit out there that you could tap into.
Completely. I mean, actually, recently, it's been funny because from a feminist lens, everybody looks at this story of like Sita's rejection, how Ram was a dickhead, blah, blah, blah. But I've been reading this really beautiful book by Arshia Sattar called Lost Loves. And it talks about like Rama's anguish and how much it must have hurt to be someone who was constantly choosing someone else, who was constantly fulfilling for someone else. And it talks about how when Ram and Sita were in the Vanvas together, they were truly in love with each other. Like Ram would collect flowers for her hair, and they would look at the stars together, and they would dream together. And then, of course, whatever, the golden deer and the war, and Lanka burns, and when they meet each other again, like Ram is a completely changed man. He's no longer the tender person that she met in the forest, but he's now king again, and he has fought a war. And when she jumps into the Agni Pariksha to be able to be tested by him, she's kind of wondering, like, what happened to that man that I loved? The man who was putting jasmine in my hair. And I think this is the beauty of a lot of these stories and these myths, is that they're not binary either. They have so much room to be able to be reinterpreted, but also to be able to see ourselves in them. Don't
My
do
love,
that.
we have 30 seconds. Sorry for this. We have 30 seconds left. I'm going to call you back because I quite like this. Do you want to carry on?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So everyone
Yeah.
watching, thank you for watching. I'm going to hang up on Shilo and then redo this. So please join us again because this is fucking lovely. Thank you. Right. And hi, Anushka. Anushka's here. And hi, Prasheen. Hi,
Hi,
everyone. Rejoin us. Rejoin us.
Oh, shit. Hello. I've got to plug myself in. Sorry about that. There was some technical issues with Instagram. And we're back. Hopefully you can hear me. But yeah, hopefully Shilo will rejoin. That was such a lovely first half. And I kind of wish that there was no break in that conversation because she's amazing. Love Shilo. So yeah, thanks for rejoining. Shilo is an amazing, amazing artist if you're joining for the first time or you missed the first half. And our conversation went all over the place, and I'm looking forward to sort of picking up where we left off. Hi Shivakami, how are you? Hi Play, hi Kat. Manish, how are you, bruv? Karthik. Nandita, hey. Thanks for rejoining, guys, and Shilo is here. There we go. Request her friendship. Let's see if she accepts. Hi!
I'm back.
Hi! 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 That was good. I used this opportunity to go we as well. But also Instagram was being really weird. It wouldn't save the thing.
Oh, damn.
Hi, Apurva. Hi, Lizzie. Warp Space is back. There you go. So, sorry, hey, Abhimanyu is here. Wicked. Hello. Magnetic Fields, Abhimanyu.
Yeah, magnetic fields, Abhimanyu. I was just within Rajasthan.
Ah, lovely. So we were just mid-flow before we had to sort of restart this chat.
Yeah. It was like, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, bye.
Where were we? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit about looking at even mythology from the perspective of just not being binary, you know. And if there's actually, I was thinking, if there's anything that like the myths can teach us, is that there is space for every kind of identity, right? Like in the Vanvas, that the Pandavas take in the Mahabharata, like Arjun turns into a woman at some point, or even with the Ramayana, like there are so many shades to each of those characters, including Ram. And I think also we're doing these stories an injustice when even as feminists we're like, Ram was a dick and Sita was amazing and she got treated so badly. It's like, yes, but also, you know, everything happens as a reaction to something, and duty plays a kind of role on his body, and perhaps love has another role in somebody else's lifetime. And so how can we even view these stories as being spectrums of emotion and humanness? Yeah.
I think it's difficult applying humanity to it when they're meant to be teaching us how to be human and respectful and have archetypes, right? And when those archetypes are so negative, it's really difficult. Or when it's been utilized for misogyny, it's really fucking difficult to defend that.
Yeah, but perhaps it's not even about defending it as much as it is about witnessing it. Like, for example, and this is also interesting because like I've been talking a lot about, there's a huge anti-Gandhi sentiment right now in the country, right? A lot of people will be like, yeah, okay, non-violence is cool, but you know what, Gandhi was a dickhead to blah, 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 you know what, blah, blah, blah. And similarly, it's also very easy for us to look at other, like everyone from Sadhguru to J. Krishnamurti, this idea of a perfect man or perfect woman, it doesn't exist. Like Krishnamurti had an affair with his secretary's wife for 25 years. I went to a Krishnamurti school, which was like 140 acres of beautiful land, and listened to his philosophy every single day. But yeah, he had an affair for 25 years. Like, he was a human being. You know, perhaps Gandhi was experimenting with his sexuality in like weird ways because he was a human being. Guess what? I've done that. You've done that. We've all done that.
And this is kind of why I don't like the idea of religious gurus or following any organized religion, because humans are inherently flawed, right? So fuck that.
Exactly. And if humans are inherently flawed, then instead of continuously being on this treadmill to be something that we can't ever be or be more than we can be, why not just accept ourselves as being human, as being, you know, mixed gradients, as being half Hindu, half Muslim, half Indian, half British, like all these halves, all these non-binary weird gradient mixes. It's really important for us to own that completely.
I think that then weaponizing that to give things like nationalism and give like one homogenized path through all that of what our culture should be and what God should be. It's kind of interesting about how that then turns into votes, and it turns into identity politics, and it becomes weaponized, so that any discussion about what it should be or what it could be is completely nixed. You can't even fucking discuss it. It's you know, and again, it goes back to my whole thing about dealing with people from the far right on Bhavan's project, where explaining nuance of mythology and culture is pointless for me. So again, I ask you, how the hell do you have the patience for that?
Yeah, I completely like so while you were taking
Well, I was doing susu. Yeah.
While you were doing susu, I went to my
like
grab
punching Instagram on the toilet. Like, come on, bastard, work. Yes.
But I went and grabbed a bunch of books. But some of them is like, for example, this is called The Pirates of Desire, which is 3,000 years of Indian erotica, which really is quite beautiful because it is literally like all these incredible pieces of poetry, literature that are deeply erotic and are Indian. What a fucking like, see, you know, what an oxymoron. Who would have thought that Indians could be erotic? I don't know. I've never seen anyone erotic around me in India, so who knows?
Do you know? Like one of the main reasons I called Shiva Sound System was being raised in a really conservative immigrant Hindu household. There was a deity called Shiva that was essentially the god of drums, the god of dance, and the god of sex. And I was like, and anti-establishment. I was like, yo, this guy told all the devas to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, like, people are asking what the name of the book is. Sorry, Shilo, I cut you off.
Many books, but like basically it's all existed before. If we have lived before, then why can't we live more, or why can't we live right now, right? Like this is, for example, the Kumara Sambhava by Kalidasa, and it's basically the lovemaking of Shiva and Parvati. It's considered a religious text. And I'm going to read some parts of it out to you because it's fucking lit. Like it's pretty. Wait, let's try and find something.
What was the name of the book before that you held up, love?
That was Pirates of Desire, which is 3,000 years of Indian erotica.
Okay, Pirates of Desire.
Yeah. So, okay, here, look at this. And Parvati abandoned herself totally to passion. All reserve she had dissolved, modesty itself had disappeared. She allowed herself to lean onto Shiva's breast, and he, taking her in his arms, made her lie down. He stretched out over her and mobile a long moment, contemplated her with adoration. Humble, tender, and unintelligible words, her eyes were lost. And he lifted her up and transported her into a grotto in a crystal that had been created to harbor their loving, and she abandoned herself completely in his arms. Her hips were heavy, where the belt of pearls had slipped. He lay down on a couch whose sheets were white as the plumage of a swan and as soft as the fine banks of sand that run beside the Ganga. And here their love was so ardent that Parvati's hair became enmeshed in Shiva's crescent moon, and the lovers dug their nails into each other's skin to the point of drawing blood. And even then Shiva's desire was not quenched. When the stars began to pale, he took pity on his beloved and consented to close his eyes. He awoke at dawn, at the hour when the lotuses open and the musicians of heaven begin to sing. A gentle breeze that had furrowed the waters of Lake Manas and shaken up the trees in the Mandana forest came in to refresh their breath, and for a brief moment they unlocked their embrace. Wanting to get rest again, as if to get up, Shiva stopped her. His gaze had been caught by the violet marks on the top of her thighs, and the clothes remained where they were. Parvati's eyes were red from the lack of sleep, her lips were bruised, her hair was in disarray, and the tilak on her forehead was smudged. To see like this stoked Shiva's passion even more. Day and night, invisible to all except his beloved, he drank of the nectar of her mouth, stretched out on the now crumpled bed where Parvati's red footprints had left their mark, and in whose folds a torn veil lay. 150 seconds passed as if it was a single night, and yet the desire of Shiva was not assuaged. It burned, devouring, insatiable, eternal, like the indomitable fire burning at the core of this earth.
Holy shit.
hot.
What was that?
Hot.
What was that book, man? I gotta write that shit down. Was it?
Yeah, this is the Kumara Sambhava by Kalidasa, which is like, I mean, I don't want to say 1,000 years old, but it's hundreds and hundreds of years old.
It got me at Pearl Belt. I was like, wow, that is a hot image.
Right?
What the fuck? Like, that's hot.
If our ancestors were this naughty, we can be as naughty as we want.
That's what I mean, man. I think there's aspects of our culture that are just completely fucking rock and roll that we tend to just put aside, which is insane to me, man.
Yeah. I mean, again, if Begum Akhtar back then could come on stage as a Muslim woman with a whiskey in her hand and sing about female desire, then who the hell, like, why do we think that it's so radical to be able to do that? We sit on the shoulders of giants, and that is such an important thing for us to recognize in order to be able to also, this is the thing, in India, we feel like we're constantly reinventing the wheel. It's like, I remember when I first, made my iPad book, it was like the first Indian woman to do this, the first Indian woman to do that. And it's like, I'm not like Neil Armstrong, like it's great, but at the same time, for me actually, my strength is not from the fact that I'm the first one to do this, but perhaps that I come from a lineage of hundreds of women, hundreds of artists who have done this before. And if they have existed before, then we can exist again and we will exist forever.
Totally. Yeah. Fuck, man. Yeah, I want to read that book. I'm feeling a bit like, I'm fucking blushing. I'm like, yo. But that's the thing. I think that, owning that idea of the feminine and projecting it to the world with such love and tenderness is something you do so fucking well.
Thanks.
I'm just like in awe of that whole thing. I think I have issues with dealing with the negative aspects in life, but you've got it fucking sorted. Here's a question from Budva saying, how do you both deal with agony that comes making art and writing and poetry? You go first.
So I've been kind of listening to this old Hindi song again and again. I can play it at some point, but it goes, जहाँ में ऐसा कौन है कि जिसको गम मिला नहीं, जहाँ में ऐसा कौन है कि जिसको गम मिला नहीं. And it basically means can you show me one person in the world who hasn't felt pain? And so I think if anything, it's a tremendous gift to be able to continuously turn pain into beauty, and simultaneously, when will it end? When do we stop? I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Romantic capitalism is great. I've taken my heartbreak. I made another album, or I've
Speaking of which, pick up Anushka Shankar in the comments. Her album's all about the heartbreak. It's fucking brilliant, though. But yes.
But I don't want my heart to be broken anymore, and I don't want to have to transmute and alchemize trauma and pain and into beauty anymore. It's a wonderful thing, but can we just have some rest, my lord? We've done our work.
But that's the life of the artist, right? It's perpetual. It's going from one shit show to another, and just putting it into art, right? Surely.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, okay. Name me one piece of work that hasn't come from that you're proud of.
I mean, a lot. That's the thing. It's like, everybody's like, maybe this is just your life's purpose, is that you take your broken heart and turn it into art. Yeah, man, like fulfillment's great, okay? Like, yes, I love Mirabai. Mirabai's like longing and stuff is beautiful. The heartbreak is beautiful, but I'm kind of done with it also. Like, I could spend the next 20 years making art about fulfillment, and I think I would give you guys a good show. So,
you know what?
Vibes, guys.
I kind of get that. There's an interview that I constantly cite with Jeremy Paxman, who's like a really big political interview in the UK, and David Bowie. And it was in 1999, and David Bowie like predicts so much shit about the nature of the world, art, and all sorts of things. But in that, he goes that when he was younger, he kind of felt the need to have a shit show in his life to produce art. And as he got older, he's like, oh, I don't need to be in the middle of that shit show. I can be outside of it and produce art. And maybe we're just not there yet.
No, I'm there. That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, Anushka has just said here, ecstatic joy can lead to stunning work, connection, reunion, tenderness. Completely. And that's exactly like, I don't want to glorify heartbreak. I don't want to glorify suffering. And there's a
Or
way that
addiction for that matter,
artists,
actually, as well.
or
It's a whole,
addiction,
yeah, yeah.
artists in the past have had this tendency to be able to, I mean, I guess we have this beautiful way to make our pain visible. And what a gift, again, that is, right? Today I was giving a talk on self-portraiture as a form of self-healing, and I was looking at Frida Kahlo's self-portraits, and she has literally drawn herself with a crown of thorns around her neck, like with, you can see every vessel and every drop of blood, you can see every tear in her eye, and it's so beautiful. But at the same time, that's not the kind of art I want to make. Like, I don't want to just make my pain visible. I want to be able to transmute, to alchemize, and finally just heal, actually. And yeah, like for me, that space is, again, I think as artists in our generation who aren't struggling, we aren't struggling in the same way that our ancestors or our lineage did. As an Indian woman who's an artist, maybe 100 years ago, I would have had no recognition. My art, would have been completely unnoticed. There wouldn't be 78 people watching us at midnight. But right, I mean, in
Or
this generation,
7:20
we do
p.m. in
have
the
that.
UK.
Well, okay, whatever. But we do have that, and or even a lot of artists who were part of the Spanish flu, the influenza, right from Edward Munch to Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele, they led very terrible lives just because they didn't have any financial stability. And mashallah, I have a lot of financial stability. So how can I use that to be able to heal not only myself, and but also my lineage, like also the artists who came before me, and say I have so much because I stand on the shoulders of you. And so how can it not just be about suffering, addiction, pain, trauma, but instead truly a healed space?
Yeah, fascinating answer. I think for me, it was more like numbness. I think going through trauma and getting numb from, I guess in my younger days, it was like drugs and alcohol. And then as I get older, it's like meditation almost, right? So it's that same numb space to be able to process that stuff, which, helps digest that trauma. Yeah.
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 Which is a very
That's
Shiva answer. Yeah,
that's
classic
my
Shiva
answer.
answer. Yeah.
This numbness is the way forward. Right. Are there any more questions, actually? There's lots of love for you, actually. This is lovely. Do you know what? I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What's the most like roughneck dangerous place you've been to on this planet to do your work?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's a funny thing. Shaheen Bagh was in its own way. It definitely felt the most real.
Can I just
Just in the
explain for
sense.
people watching what Shaheen Bagh is, or could you explain what Shaheen Bagh is, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So, my answer is twofold. Pakistan and Shaheen Bagh felt like the most real experiences for me. There's a weird way that you can land up in the middle of like I said, Lebanon or Brazil or whatever, and feel a little bit like an outsider to what's going on. But with Pakistan and with Shaheen Bagh, I felt deeply embedded in what was going on, and so the fear was very tangible. Before coronavirus, there was another crisis that we were feeling, which was, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with CAA and NRC, which was a draconian law that was being put into place by the government that made it possible to strip away the citizenship of thousands and millions of Muslim Indians in India. And when that happened, it felt like kind of like the straw on the camel's back, where we had been quiet about Kashmir, we had been quiet about demonetization, so many things that the current government had put in place, we were quiet about. But when that happened, it felt like we were breaking a very kind of almost archaic, not archaic, but like primal promise, which was the promise of India, which was a secular space. And so the country erupted into the most astounding protests that I have seen. On the first day of the protest, me and my mother got detained by the police, which was kind of awesome. For us, it was like, proper rock and roll, because both of us got into totally different protest tactics. Like when we got arrested, or got detained rather, my mum turned her entire body into a rock. Like she was like, no one can pick me up. Like, just you try, motherfucker. Like her body weight like turned, 10 times heavier than she was. And like she had 4 police women trying to throw her into this police vehicle. And when I was being pulled into the same police vehicle, I got super new school. I was like, Instagram Live, this is the number of the police vehicle.
Oh, I remember. I remember the WhatsApp group going off. I remember that now. Yeah, totally. I remember. Oh, yeah, of course. Our group just blew up. We were just like, yo, let's get Shilo out.
So, anyway, but Shaheen Bagh was this is an internal, incredible space that existed in Delhi. It's a Muslim neighborhood where a group of women, all Muslim women, basically blocked a national highway, and it started off with perhaps 100 women, and then it became into this beating heart. Like I used to call it Revolution Heartland, because it really was a beating heart where there was Urdu poetry being read at night, and Faiz Ahmed Faiz was alive again. Iqbal Bano was being sung again and again. And it for me, it also became into a space where art had a real space in resistance in this very decolonized way in India. It wasn't like we were being, inspired by Black Lives Matter or what was happening somewhere else in the world. It was us recognizing ourselves in this very beautiful way. So yeah, it was one of India's biggest sit-ins. There were hundreds of women who spent almost, I think it was like 3 months before it was shut down by the lockdown, but out on the streets, literally blocking a national highway with their bodies, and late into the night reciting the constitution, rewriting the constitution, coming to terms with this imagination that India is, so it's a very beautiful space. And both of those spaces both Pakistan and Shaheen Bagh felt very real and very dangerous in their own ways.
I'm surprised like the media hasn't come after you with regards to what you say.
Yeah. Again,
particularly in like the relationship recently.
Yeah. I think it's a karmic thing. I don't want to jinx it, but I do think actually.
I'm going to touch lots of wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be. I guess that I'm glad that you don't get like any shit, but you're quite an outspoken feminist, and you're an activist, and you utilize your art as. I don't want to use like a masculine word like weapon, but you do utilize it in a way that's not aggressive, but it's definitely out there. You know what I mean? It's fearless. Fucking hell, that's a cheesy line, isn't it? But it's true. Like, I guess I'm just astounded that it's not that easy for you, but it just seems to just be met with no resistance.
I mean, again, touch wood, but also, again, like, I do believe that everybody has different faiths, and so perhaps also sometimes when the resistance comes, if it's not a point of trauma for me, I'm not even going to react to it. Like sometimes I walk around with people, Shane, of course, Shane in the UK, in London. Like I remember him once telling me when we were walking around in Dharavi together, he's like, don't you ever notice how people stare at you? And I was like, who's staring at me? I didn't even notice, And so if it's not a point of trauma, if it's not a trigger, then you can just live the way that you want to live. Yeah.
That's pretty gangster. There's a question.
But there are other points of trauma and triggers which are just like, damn.
Yeah, absolutely. But you tend to navigate them better than anyone else I know. There's a question here from Walk Spaces, which is how has the journey of self-love in fact, that won't fill the screens, I have to read it out. How has the journey of self-love, rising in love with your own quintessence and breath, unfurled and blossomed through your art?
That's a beautiful question. I guess like self-love, self-worth, and self-care are 3 very different things to me. And it's one thing to love yourself. It's another thing to think that you're worthy of being loved by someone else. It's another thing to take care of yourself because you're worthy of being cared for by yourself. And so for me, I think like recognizing the self as a space of sacredness, as the divine, as a cup that can be continuously filled is definitely, it comes easy. And it also comes easy because of my art practice. Like I said, self-portraiture has been a big part of my art practice. And every time I paint a self-portrait, it's about moving from who I'm told to be to who I want to be. And that movement in itself is an act of self-love and self-determination. But self-care and self-worth have been a completely different story for me.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, my idea of self-love is like basically a bottle of bourbon and talking to my mates on Instagram. Fucking great. There's a question here from Sahe, which is saying, how difficult is it to deal with, I think he wants to say divisive, but derisive, derogatory, I guess, when you're not even allowed to discourse it. I don't know, that doesn't make sense. I guess it's saying, how do you deal with negative criticism?
How do you deal with negative criticism? Yeah, again, just kind of like I mean, I don't know. I'm just so embedded in my own universe, and the things that I do, especially when it comes to my art practice, I just do them for myself. So it really, like, yes, it matters, of course, you know, like the likes and the loves and the comments matter.
That
But
hit of dopamine is very useful.
it's useful for sure, and it's also something I use very strategically when I write like a love poem for someone which doesn't get a response. I put it out on my Instagram page, and I'm like, yay! So many people love me.
They don't, like, he doesn't love me, they don't love me, but everyone else does, so it's fine.
all these strangers love me, so that must mean something. No, but I've also been very lucky just in the sense that I think also, like, I don't consider myself mainstream, and I think also I'm definitely not like 1 million followers, 300,000 followers. And I think I confuse a lot of people who just don't understand what I'm up to. So, you know, in that sense, it's kind of like...
I was going to say, confusion is a great weapon.
Right?
I fucking love confusion. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
The
like
amount
maybe
of people that
like fundamental guys were just like, she was reading the Kalidasa, she's so devout. It's like, I'm reading some hectic erotica right now. Wow.
You know, I love confusing people in terms of sexuality, in terms of like all of this kind of stuff. It's just, you know, that confusion I revel in, you know.
Absolutely.
I'm interested to think that, I mean, it's interesting to me to hear you say that too, because I always thought your online profile or your presence was pretty unidirectional.
Yeah, and I think that's also quite a filter, just in the sense that those who get it, and those who don't get it are just out, and it's fine.
Sorry, love. Hang on. There's a question from Nandini again saying, how do you connect with people that come from different countries than you? And you mentioned earlier you felt like an outsider.
Yeah, I mean, not even so much an outsider, but just it doesn't feel as real. The images of like people on Babri Masjid demolishing a mosque feel very real to me. The feeling of a Hindu mob feels very real to me. You know, but somehow the idea of a war or a refugee crisis in another context, it feels real, but it still feels disconnected. But the way that we do connect with the fearless process and methodology is through emotional resonance in a way, which is kind of what I was mentioning earlier. Is regardless of whether you your political ideology, we all feel emotional realities. We all feel fear. We all feel love, heartache, loss, joy. And so how can we tap into those emotions as being our common ground? And with that common ground, then, like, what can we create? So, yeah, we've been in pretty crazy situations across the world with, like, queer communities who are dancing out on the street with, like, very conservative, you know, Turkish refugees who are dancing out with, you know, like, with migrant domestic workers. And we somehow create those emotional spaces where we all feel the same. And this pandemic has kind of been like that in a way as well, is that regardless of your political leaning, we're all feeling a similar thing.
So it's basically that human thing, but I guess the trauma in India is what's going to connect to you directly, right? That's the one thing you're going to feel the most.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Big up Shruti Hassan. Hello. How you doing? M. Sharoom, that's a fucking great name, says, how do you make a preliminary idea or concept into a painting? That's a very nerdy question.
It's a nerdy question.
Yeah.
How do I make a idea or concept into a painting? I guess, like, what's beautiful about riyaz or practice is if you spend enough time doing the same thing, it comes quite easily. In the beginning, it may have been like, you know, you really need to and this is not just with art and music, but also with everything. Like if you turn up in the garden enough, you will learn how to garden. If you turn up, in the kitchen enough, you'll learn how to cook, and it becomes into this automatic, invisible, unspoken relationship that you have with your art practice. I'm sure now, do you feel the same way? Like
Dude,
now,
you just
when
blow my fucking mind. No, absolutely. You're 100% right. It's just like being somewhere and then saying, I want to be part of this is half the fucking battle. And then you become part of that.
and then
you blow my mind. Yeah, totally.
and with the things that we know that we love, like our art and our music, it's easier for us to turn up and for it to become into something that is a ritual that becomes into a practice that then becomes into a language, like a vocabulary. Now when you turn up at your decks, you know exactly what you're doing, and it's intuitive, natural. And I've seen you in that state. I remember like at that, in Alcisa Haveli at that Prince night, like you were in a flow state.
Dude, were you there that set, the second Magnetic Fields after Marla, where I played for like 4 hours? And I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I just played.
That was a deep, intuitive flow state, for sure. Right? But you wouldn't have been able to get there if you hadn't turned up at the decks, awkward, figuring it out, playing for the first time, afraid.
And it's interesting because Anushka was on this chat, Anushka Shankar, we were talking about sort of how a lot of practice is there so then you can get it out the way.
Yeah.
So you rehearse, you learn your craft, and then you can do it and get out of your own way and let it flow. So is that the same with you?
Yeah, 100%. Like practice, riyaz, turn up every day, and then the second you turn up, it's going to start to happen. And at some point, it'll start to really reward you. Which for me, it's like, yes, again, we can turn up for the things that we really love, but how do we begin to extend ourselves to turn up for the things that we don't necessarily love, but we know we ought to do?
There's a question here which is quite fascinating because it gets to the nitty gritty. Divya Patel or Divya K Patel. Divya anyway. I think it's a she. Yeah, she's asking, how do you deal with anxiety when you're not making enough money as an artist?
Yeah,
do you just turn the anxiety into art?
Yeah, just write to a lot of people.
Just like, fuck.
Remember me. Put a picture of yourself looking cute, and then someone's gonna notice you.
You know what? That's the thing, actually. So you talk about that. It's something because I'm so fucking old, and I started doing this when I'm 42 now. I started doing this when I was 16. So social media and all that kind of stuff. Like I don't do these for the likes. I do them to actually keep myself sane. But you've navigated that so well, which I find interesting because I can learn from you and our mutual friends as well, like how to do that. Do you actually strategize that shit to like specifically encourage the economics of your art?
No, not at all. And I don't even think it does encourage the economics of my art, just in the sense that a lot of the people who follow me tend to be, in all love and respect, very beautiful women, sometimes men. I have a smaller male following.
Hi.
Hi. At some point, a friend of mine was like, "Why don't you have any fanboys? Why do you only have fangirls?" And it's just like, it's true. Why don't I have any fanboys? Anyway, but it's non-strategic. It's quite natural. It's like almost unstrategic in the sense that I don't think it actually makes that much sense for me to be putting parts of myself out there consistently all the time, and also not really, like, how you need to sometimes keep things a secret in order for it to feel special. Like, don't put up yourself painting the same painting for 6 months, or drop it. Learn to keep the mystery and the suspense. I just don't know how to do that. I just put it all out there all at once, and so
you're like, Prack, there you go.
Yeah.
Do you start from sketches and then build up, or do you just fucking go in ham on a big piece?
I have different. I mean, with different things, I work in different ways. Like when I'm working on a sculpture, it usually, like, I work with a jeweler or with a metal worker, or like people like Heather, and who are precious resources, and so then I'm able to manifest that vision into a reality. When I work on a painting, it sometimes it works in different ways. Yeah.
Nice. I'm laughing because Anushka's basically, I'm going to tell everyone, Anushka Shankar has a filthy mouth and she constantly makes mom jokes, like constantly. So if there's any way to go, your mom does this, that's what she does. There you go. I'll bring it up. Yeah. So there you go. I've rumbled you, Anushka. I'm telling everybody. I don't care anymore. Yeah. But that also, in terms of your like typography, it's very fucking distinct, right? Like there's a whole flow to your lettering and typography. Like, how is that? Like, it feels like it almost jumps out like off the painting. You know what I mean? There's like a tail end of the work that then just comes off into a word. And it's a whole other discipline. What the fuck? Explain that shit to me, please.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, kind of like when I was 12 or 13, I wanted to be a writer, and I used to write a lot of like bad poetry. And then I got into painting, and again, also partly because my mother's an artist as well, and she was painting, and I was painting with her, and I was teaching art with her. And then I realized that I was starting to incorporate some of my writing into my painting, and sometimes they would take the form of almost like prayers, you know, like the things that I was longing for, I would write into loopy handwriting, and sometimes in secret ways. In a lot of the fearless murals that I paint, like right on the top where no one can see, I often inscribe little verses and little poems, and I believe that like every time the rain falls on those murals, or every time there's wind blowing against those murals, those prayers are answered. So writing has become a big part of a part of the practice in general, and more so in the last few years.
It's almost like a sigil.
Yeah, exactly.
But in words.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's nuts. In fact, speaking of Anushka, she's asked a question which I think is beautiful, which is, can you talk about the impact of color in our spirit, emotional psyche, and how that factors into your work?
Beautiful. Yeah, Anushka, sometime we should talk about this even more, because, you know, like, again, the ragas have such a beautiful way of mapping color onto emotion, into season, into sound. And that is part of our lineage. And for me, a lot of it has been very intuitive. The colors that I use have been very intuitive, but I do think that from intuition, or the reason that we have intuitive ways of painting, creating, is because we're tapping into something. And for us to be able to articulate that in contemporary ways, I think is really important. So I would love to actually explore that more, like what is the influence that sound, color, season, rain, monsoon cloud has on our psyche, and how that could be a reciprocal relationship and not just a one-way street.
I wonder if there's been an Indian artist that's been able, like Anushka says, Nava Rasa Ranga. I don't know what that means. What does it mean?
The 9 different emotions that would play out between everything from our performance arts to music to visual arts as well.
I wonder if there's been a case of an Indian musician or artist that's had synesthesia, where you can see sound in colors and vice versa, or you can hear colors. That'd be fucking cool.
Yeah.
There has to be someone in the Indian pantheon of artists that has that condition. Surely. Can you name someone?
I thought we weren't allowed to talk about drugs on the show.
I meant without drugs. I meant like an actual condition.
No.
We're not allowed to talk
Show
about
me that.
No. But actually, I mean, in terms of that whole pantheon of works, and cross-pollinating between sort of art and music, which is an obvious one, is there any other field you'd want to do? Like, is there anything else you'd want to get into?
That's a lovely question. I was always asked if I wasn't a painter, what would I want to be? And I think I would probably want to be like a classical dancer. Like, I would love to. Yeah, I think so. I think that'd be a vibe for sure. But
I mean, sorry, I'm just going to interject now. The last time I saw you dance was hanging off scaffolding at Magnetic School.
Classic move.
Just like an Indian Mad Max. It was amazing.
So everything is classic. But yeah, I think if I wasn't a painter, I would definitely would want to at least get into something like that. But again, I think there is something quite beautiful of us to be able to tap into that lineage, regardless of what our art form is, and to be able to project it into a future. And in spaces like ours, anyway, time is not linear. It's not, I mean, the more you go into your future, the more you end up back in your past sometimes because it's cyclic. And so that's also for me, I think, with people like you, with people like Anushka, what's becoming interestingly interesting is like,
Interesting, yes.
Interestingly interesting is how when we step into our past, we are actually stepping into our futures. And then what does South Asian futurism look like for us? And how can we really manifest those visions?
I think it's fascinating that the sort of South Asian futurism aspect seems to have been culled by a certain amount of imposed tradition, which is tragic as fuck.
Do you think so?
Oh yeah, 100%. The whole homogenization of like Hindu mythology, of culture in India, and like we discussed earlier about the kind of barriers of progression and evolution are manifestly in power right now. So what the fuck can you do? But then again, like I said, I think with Britain, and what I love about Britain, and particularly its music and culture, is that whenever there's a resistance, whenever there's an imposing force, there's a creative resistance that gives birth to a fucking billion new genres that then change the cultural landscape of the country. Like punk, like rave, like we discussed earlier.
Yeah. And also, I mean, Kabir, Meera, Andal, Akka Mahadevi, that was also all punk in its own way, because these were Sufi mystics and poets who and folk singers who were standing up against a couple of things. They were, first of all, standing up against institutionalized religion and saying that, God doesn't exist in your temple or in your mosque. God exists inside of my body, and my body is also sacred, which is really radical and kind of punk, and for that time. And they were also saying that I don't need to be classically trained in order to be able to write, to sing, or to have access. And that's why I think
punk as fuck.
Which is, punk as fuck. Like, for me, folk music in India is fucking punk, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's the most, like, I used to work with this project called the Kabir Project, and we used to, like, document Kabir's poetry and folk music in different parts of the country. And, like, I remember being out in, like, the salt desert in Kutch, with these guys called the Vai singers, and Vai means like an intense calling or like a pukar to God. And they were just out there with these like single-stringed instruments, just screaming, like just being like, just screaming.
It's like fucking blues. It's basically like early blues.
Yeah. Like the same way that Pussy Riot went into a church, the same way a lot of folk musicians would stand in front of temples, in front of institutions, and sing from their guttural, primal spaces. So punk forever.
You should totally form a punk band with a lot of our female friends.
I think so. I think that's.
I can imagine Anushka with like distortion pedals and shit, just shredding.
I feel like that's next. that's my next place. Yeah.
We're gonna make that shit happen, man. That's fine. If you guys need a manager, I'm here. It's fine.
Yeah.
But look, thank you so much for this, man. I really appreciate this, and for staying on for like an hour and fucking 50 minutes. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is great. This is amazing.
And it's been really lovely catching up. I am gonna go and pee. And then therefore relax a little bit. I'm sort of dancing around this seat. Not kind of like that. Anyway, my love, thank you so much for joining me. And also, quickly, you did the cover of Gaurana's book.
Yes, I did.
So talk about it, for fuck's sake.
It's right here.
I mean, Jesus, I lined you up for a plug, and you're just like, okay, yeah, I did. Excellent. Yeah, there you go. What's it called? Because it's in Mirror.
The heart asks pleasure first.
The heart asks. Asks. Okay.
Asks.
The heart asks? What, the bottom of the heart?
Asks.
And you obviously the cover of it. Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, well, look, thank you for joining me. I'm
Yay! This is amazing. Thank you so much.
And this will all be archived afterwards. And thank you everyone watching and joining in and asking questions and stuff. It's lovely. Big love.
Lovely conversation.
Mwah. See you soon. I hope.
Bye.
I hope to see you in the real.
Yeah, I know, right? I want to just get on a flight and come already.
Come, bastard.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, bye.